I spoke to Priscilla A Clapp. She once served as chief of mission at the U.S. Embassy in Myanmar, and I asked her about the significance of this conference.
It's just a first step. It's both significant and a first step, because it's the first attempt to bring everybody into the dialogue. She wants to illustrate her desire to make the dialogue as inclusive as possible. During the Thein Sein government, the previous government, the dialogue began between armed groups. The National Army, which we call the Tatmadaw on one hand, and the armed ethnic groups on the other. There were 17 armed ethnic groups brought into the negotiation on a ceasefire agreement. In the process of negotiating the ceasefire agreement, they also got into political dialogue and began to negotiate a framework for political dialogue. So you had armed groups determining what the political dialogue would be without the participation of any civilian political leaders. What she's trying to do, I believe, is to broaden this so that eventually the civilian political leaders take charge of the dialogue.
What are some of the major sticking points among all of these various groups? Some of them have been at war for several decades.
The most important thing for them is a greater degree of autonomy than they have now. They have very little now, and the fighting has been about autonomy. So they're looking at creating some kind of a federal structure to the government that goes beyond what they have now. And it's only in the last few years that the government, and particularly the military, has even agreed to use the word federal. So that's all very new, and they're all studying various different kinds of federal structures around the world to see what direction they want to go in. It will eventually require changing the Constitution or amending or revising the Constitution, but they're not there yet. They still have a long way to go, but autonomy and some control over their identity, their national identity, their ethnic identity, and their resources. Because the country has 7 ethnic states and 7 regions that are basically the ethnic Bama, the dominant ethnic group, the Bama. But the 7 states represent the largest of the 7 ethnic minorities, and they want to have more control over their territory.
There are reports one of the largest opposition groups walked out of the conference. There were a few others that were not invited or they did not attend. What do you think the prospect for peace is here?
The prospect is still a long way off because there are so many different issues. Each group has a different set of issues. Some are shared. The issue on autonomy is shared, but they each have different ideas of what their autonomy should be. The group that walked out are the Wa. Now, the Wa are a very large army. They are by far the largest, probably 40,000 or more armed forces, and they're well armed. They're right on the border with China. Most of them don't even speak Burmese, and that might have contributed to the confusion that led to their walking out. It may be that they'll be urged back in because the Chinese very much China wanted them to be part of this discussion. So I don't think this is over yet.